Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to another segment of Asaph Cafe. I am your host, Asaph Adonai. We're in our Lawrence Welk set, and this time on my immediate right we have Teresa Toigo again, who's joined us. And of course our affectionate, our aging rocker, Emmett. He's on my left. And our hostess is back, Patty Reed. She's been gone for a while, and she's back. And we have our mascot Pee Wee, and I like how she's just wagging her tail.
Hostess with the mostest.
Yeah, hostess with the mostest.
See, I'm wagging from an astral projection right here. Woo! See, she's right there.
We'll make sure she doesn't fall. Well, I'm going to do more some music stuff this time. You guys can help me with requested tunes. And since Emmett likes easy listening music,
yes,
let's start off with the traditional Burt Bacharach's "This Guy's in Love with You."
Yes.
And Pee Wee will wag her tail to the rhythm of the music. Note for note.
Friar.
She'll pat along too. She's musically
This will be
inclined.
for you, Emmett.
Thanks. Wanting to pop these bubbles. Yeah.
They're the driest bubbles I've seen yet.
Yes, I know.
That's some good chemistry there.
This is such a cool song.
We're just missing the champagne now. That's it.
I
Yeah,
know.
we'll get that soon.
Yeah.
Herb Alpert did a great job singing this song
Yeah.
when he introduced it.
Herb Albert and the T1 Girl.
Yeah.
You're just too hot for your own good. You're a real hot chick. What a dog. What a dog.
This is such a beautiful
It
song.
is.
Give me the bug. Give me
It
And the
is.
conclusion.
Give me the bug. Yay! She's stepping it up. She
But
has
yeah, Teresa,
smelt of the food.
Herb Alpert introduced that song to the world, even though Burt Bacharach wrote it. And what was cool about that is that he was sitting on a giant letter H that represented his name. They had a prop, a letter H, and he was sitting up in the middle of the line, and he was singing that song. He had his trumpet in his hand. I did at the end. It was pretty cool. He plays that melody on his trumpet. That was just way cool. Just the coolest video.
One paw up.
I mean, I can't play the trumpet or anything anymore, but
Yes.
Herb Alpert, he was just such a great
No.
trumpet player to me.
Wonderful.
I mean, he just left some great fun music.
Yeah, yeah.
Plus, the guy could play. He had a great
Yeah,
set of
yeah.
chops, you know,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
call it for trumpet players. Guy
Yeah.
can play.
Absolutely.
He's still going strong after all these
That's
years.
good.
He was in, I think he was in Whitefish about a year and a half ago.
Oh, I didn't know
Oh,
that.
really?
He did a concert up in Whitefish.
Wow. we came
Yeah, I
all
saw
the
it
way
in the
to
papers.
Montana.
Mhm.
Wow.
Well, he physically doesn't look quite the same as he once did, obviously, because he's getting up there in
does?
years.
Yeah.
But I think his lips,
Yeah.
embouchure, they call
Yeah.
it.
Mr.
Johnny
Ma-
Carson.
Mr.
Embouchure.
Maggio don't
Yeah.
look
He
right
can still play, you know, that's pretty cool. So
You know, Mr. Mangione, these days looks like somebody from King of the Hill. He's turned cartoon. Same thing with Tom Petty, he turned cartoon too. And so is Willie Nelson.
Tom Petty.
Yeah, and Willie Nelson.
Yeah.
They've all been on
Willie
King of the Hill. CW, King of the Hill. So they're all turning into cartoons.
King of the Hill.
Well, again, Lord, thank you for the food that you've given us. Bless it again in Jesus' name. Thank you.
thank you. You know the song?
Yeah, that's a Mr. Mangione song. That was one of his first hits, but I never caught the name of it.
I've heard it, but I don't know where it came from, what television show it was, you know.
Actually, Chuck Mangione, he was an interesting trumpet player to me.
Mm-hmm.
He had a gimmick that I think worked. He used to come out with that hat. He had like this black hat.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, he
that
still has it.
wore when he
Still has
was in his heyday
Mhm.
performing.
Still
And he
has
didn't really play a trumpet. He played what was called a flugelhorn, which
Mhm.
is like, I call it a pregnant trumpet. This
Oh.
big bell that it looked cool when he was playing it. And so he was playing that song. It's called Feels So Good.
Mm-hmm.
It's just such a relaxing, happy
Yeah,
song.
yeah.
And
It went
he
number
was
one.
smooth too, you know, when he'd come out and you know, it was just pretty cool to watch
Yeah.
this guy play
A lot of
that.
air. Had a lot of air.
And of course, well, I guess if you're gonna play, I don't know they call, what was it? It was a big trumpet, but flugelhorn.
Huh.
And I guess it takes a lot of wind to play one of those kind
Oh,
of
they play
instruments.
those at the German Fest.
And like Patty was saying, what's that TV show? They're always
King of the Hill.
King of the Hill. Yeah, Chuck Mangione plays his little flugelhorn
He's on
trumpet.
Megalo. They're little.
Yeah, I'm King of the Hill. That's a
in
goofy
Texas.
cartoon, by the way.
Yeah, I've
but-
never cared for it. I've just never gotten into King of the Hill. It was kind of things spun off Beavis and Butthead, ironically.
Yeah, I know, but Chuck Mangione's character, you know, I don't know how they talked that guy into
Yeah.
letting
Milos
him use
Kunis
his
is on
image,
there,
but...
and then they also have Seth Green. He's on there too.
But I have seen Chuck Mangione on television in his
Mhm.
heyday, and I used to think, man, this is interesting watching this guy.
Mm-hmm.
The guy can play,
Mm-hmm.
and so can Herb Alpert. You know, they
Oh,
just
yes, yes.
do those fun, happy songs, and I think that's cool.
I'm
It
amazed
is.
at how much air they have to hold them notes out.
Well, you know, I'm not trying to pick on Dizzy Gillespie, but you know, you don't have to have every song lightning fast where you can't
Yeah.
hear the notes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I used to watch Dizzy Gillespie when I was growing up. Every song that guy ever played. And after about the third song, your ears are like, oh, I want to hear
Yeah.
some song. I want to
Yeah.
hear some melody.
Give him some helium.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I like Dizzy Gillespie when I was growing up. He just was interesting, but you know, the thing they call that bebop jazz, and the
Mhm.
problem with bebop, you can't dance to it. You can't retain the
dance to it.
You
notes
can
you
tap
hear.
dance to it though.
No, because you know it's so lightning fast. You just enjoy it for that moment, and,
Yeah.
and that's it. It's gone. But you listen to Louis Armstrong, for example, Chuck Mangione, Herb Alpert,
Mhm.
and you know all the other great trumpet players in the past, like Hugh Mesa Kela. Do you remember him grazing in the grass?
There was a guy in the 50s. He played the saxophone. He was really good. I can't think of his
Something
name.
like that. But anyway, you know those were happy little songs that you could
Mm-hmm.
take.
Do you know the one I'm thinking of? He was a black guy, but he played the saxophone. It was in the 50s and 60s. He was really good. I can't think
Gosh,
of
there
his
were a
name.
lot of African American sax players in the
I
'60s.
can't,
Mhm.
I can't think
There
of
was
his
Charlie
name.
Parker. There was John Coltrane, I believe.
He goes. "Ba, da, 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 da."
Oh, are you talking about Take Five? It was something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I've heard that. That's a nice song, yeah.
I like this one. They had a saxophone in there. The guy
Yeah,
was really good.
that was Paul Desmond, the saxophonist.
Yeah, he was
The name
really
of the
good.
song is called Take Five.
Okay, take
Yeah, Dave Brubeck's orchestra, but it was Paul Desmond who was the saxophonist.
My
that
mom
did
always
it.
would start dancing when she'd hear that. She'd be up off the couch. So one time she becomes singing.
You know what's interesting about that song? The reason it's called Take Five because the meter, if you think it's in 5 beats. 1, 2, 1, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Something like.
Oh, okay.
Hear that 5?
Yep.
And then with the sax,
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's so it's Take Five. It was, what was interesting about Dave Brubeck was he spent his career doing music that was off the regular rhythms, and that's why it worked.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, there's a rhythm called 7/8. It's like this.
Oh yeah. That's a dance song.
You know, yeah.
It was from
And like to Take
a
Five,
play.
you know, because the normal traditional beats are like 4/4.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just 4 beats.
Isn't
and
that the one that goes, we're gonna be in America, gonna do
something like that? Yeah, you know, Dave Brubeck experimented with time at that time when he first came out, and that's why it was interesting because it was not the traditional 4
Just get
beats or
ready to fly
3
away.
beats like a waltz. Like a waltz would be something like this. 1, 2, 3.
That's the waltz, Pee
You know, 3 beats. You can
Mm-hmm.
feel that 1, 2, 3, 1. And so Dave Brubeck would be experimenting off time, 5 beats, 7-beat and stuff like that. Something like that. But anyway, it just he did all these off rhythm stuff and it worked for him.
Interesting.
Yeah, and of course, by the time they did Take 5, that was the most interesting song to me in history, jazz history. Just pretty cool song.
Yeah.
And it's mellow. It's not really loud, but it makes sense.
Yeah, and I like that. You know, it wasn't all that lightning fast. They call it torrid finger.
Whenever you want to relax, my mom, when she wanted to relax or get up and dance, that's the song for her.
Well, you know, my teacher, Bumps Blackwell, he used to tell me stories about Louis Armstrong, and he thought that bebop was called jujitsu music.
Yeah.
They're playing that long hair jujitsu music.
Yeah.
Except when he did What a Wonderful World.
No, well, you know, I mean, all bebop is just, every song is just lightning fast. And what they do is they play the melody and then they go off in where no man has gone before, like Star Trek.
Yes.
And you don't even know what they're playing. You just have to sit there and listen to it. And then they finally do the melody again and that's it. And then the next song was the same thing.
Yeah.
And I like jazz, but it gets dull after a while.
It does, actually.
Because it's the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Every single song is lightning fast. You can't remember
Blues are about
notes.
the same way too.
You know, they just
Reggae.
so.
Yeah, reggae too.
And I'm not picking on jazz.
I call
know
reggae
that's a
music.
different art form. But after
call
about
reggae
2 or 3
music.
songs, I've had enough.
Yeah.
I'd rather just listen to
Exactly.
the easy
Same
listening,
thing with the
Exactly.
Mariachi bands of the
fun
Mexican
songs that you can
music.
hum along and
Yes.
take with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you listen to that bebop long enough, you're like, man, get the Tylenol. I got a
Exactly.
headache, you know.
I stick to
I
good
got
old
a
rock
headache,
and
you
roll.
know.
Me and rock.
I love smooth jazz. It's
Yeah,
kind of like
that's-
Muzak. That's different. It's
Yeah,
kinda
that's
like
no, that
old music. I
bebop
like
is
that.
that lightning quick.
Yeah, just whatever. you know.
Just. I mean, and then everybody takes a solo, right? And
Yeah,
then the trumpet player.
Well,
This trumpet player, he's like lighting up the thing,
Yeah.
right? And the sax gets in, and then when he's done, then the piano player,
Yeah.
digital lightning
Then,
fast.
then
Yeah.
after a while, you have to just do what Bob Seger says. Just take those old records off the shelf.
Yeah, you do.
I gotta listen to them by myself. Today's music ain't got the same soul. I like that old time of rock and roll.
Yep.
She might, well, say I'm a fashion, say I'm over the hill. Just want your way to get me
Something
to do.
like that, you know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
how
like
something
that
goes.
old time of rock and roll.
Yeah.
Woo!
But you know the history of bebop. When it was an interesting concept when it first came out, like in the late 40s, early 50s. But the problem that the American public had with bebop was the kids couldn't dance to it.
Yeah.
They just, like you listen to Buddy Holly,
Yeah.
you listen to Little Richard and all those people of that era,
Yeah.
and you could dance to their music, whatever you thought of these people.
Yeah.
James Brown.
Yeah.
Ow! I feel good.
Yeah. I Buddy Holly and Little Richard just give me the shivers. Just I can't stand that kind of music. That's screaming. Shake it to the right, shake it to the left.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, you could dance to that music, and then when bebop came out, the kids and the teenagers couldn't dance to it because every song was so lightning fast.
I used to think they couldn't dance good to Respect.
No. How can you dance to?
Like I said, I can
and all that.
I could just see the women going, "We ain't dancing, but we asking for respect."
But see, the thing, when rock and roll first came out, early rock and roll, it put a lot of people in the big band era out of work because and my teacher even said this, the music was so simple. They had an old saying, KISS, keep it simple, stupid, when you're a composer, because that's what you want. You want songs that people can relate to.
Uh-huh.
You don't want all this complex stuff that, all you can do is just sit in the audience and just go like this and listen to it, song after song.
And sit
that's
there and
the
wonder
problem
how
with
do
jazz.
they
You
do
can't-
that with their fingers without going like this.
There's a trick to it when you play jazz. You have to have an extensive knowledge of chords and scales.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
But see, the thing is, you can't dance to that.
No.
And so most people are going to want to hear Marty Robbins or somebody, or, even James Brown, for example, you can dance to his music. You
Well,
can dance to Cab Calloway.
Chubby Checker.
Yeah, come on, baby, let's do the
twist.
You know, let's see if I can figure it out.
Well,
Let's do that twist.
I want to dance.
Come on, baby. Let's do the twist. And a little bow. It goes like this.
Something like
yeah.
that.
When I was in high school, someone secretary was somewhere was typing. So I actually tried to dance to the typewriter, and I was quite good. That was pretty good.
Let's talk about the typewriter for a second. Do you remember the skit that Jerry Lewis did when he was a young man called The Typewriter?
No, I don't. No.
Well, this was before the computer age came out, and if you go on YouTube and put Jerry Lewis The Typewriter, you can see it. He did it in a film when he was very young, and then when he was doing the telethons, he brought that back to life. But basically, they had this orchestra music in the background, and he was pretending to play a typewriter. And he was doing all these tricks and stuff. It was pretty cool. But it's called the
Can I
typewriter.
ask something? What happened to the telethon
Oh,
after Jerry Lewis passed?
well, he didn't pass away. He just probably got physically too old to do that anymore. So they're probably just doing fundraisers.
They're winging it.
Yeah.
You know. Well, he
Because they
did
still
that
have
for
it
what,
around, but
30,
they're-
40 years?
Yeah, the
I think
NBA
now
telethon.
they're
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
having the
you can
local
only do
networks
that for
do
so
it
many
for
years, you
themselves.
know, and Jerry Lewis, God bless him, what is he, like 85, 86?
Yeah, I don't
didn't
know.
He was still alive.
Yeah, he's still alive. I don't think he's physically
People are waiting
able
for
to
that
do
last visit
anymore.
between him and Dean Martin.
Well, see, the thing is, you know, when he was a young man,
Dean
he'd stay up for like
Martin.
2 days, you know, doing the whole telethon, but then when he got older, he started just...
Worried
they'd
about getting
show him,
MS
you know,
himself.
They'd show him till like midnight, and they'd have the show, and he'd come back in the morning.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why they had better
Stuff like
acts as they got there and they were longer, you know. So
But
they
you know, the
wanted
thing
to
is
so
that
much.
when you're young, you can only do that for so long.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
the batteries are going.
but Jerry Lewis, he will probably always be remembered as the king of comedy.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, his movies were just outrageously
He just
funny.
liked to be goofy. He was just goofy.
But see, it worked.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever get to see that typewriter skit, you got to see it. He is literally sitting here, because, you know, we live in the age of the computers. I don't even think anybody would even know what a typewriter is.
I know.
But he's like in an office typing, and when the orchestra's playing, they have these little bells and stuff when he's doing things like sliding the paper and sliding the typewriter over, and ding, you know, just doing all that stuff. And it's just delightful and fun to.
He had to
This
memorize
is-
the song to get that on the keyboard.
Well, yeah, I'm sure they had to practice that, but that was one of his biggest skits called The Typewriter.
Yeah.
Jerry Lewis. The
I've seen a
Typewriter.
movie with him and Dean Martin in it. I don't remember the name of it, but they had a Great Dane that was sitting between the two of them. Okay, and they for some reason they were arguing like they do, and so out of frustration, Jerry Lewis decides to run through this haystack with the car and the dog and Dean Martin. Right. Well, when they come out, the dog's driving. Jerry's upside down with his feet sticking out, and Dean's sitting there going, "You see, this is why I don't let you drive." So this is why.
Well, you know, they
now
had
the
a
dog's
great.
driving and we're messed.
They had a great act.
Mm-hmm.
Martin and Lewis. They dominated the.
They were like Abbott and Costello.
Yeah, but those two in particular, they just really stuck out like sore thumbs. They had a kind of a comedy that really went well with the audiences.
What
Oh, wonderful.
nationality was Jerry Lewis?
I
you
don't
think?
know, but see, like anything else, sometimes when you have a pair
Mm-hmm.
performers, one eventually decides to either get tired of the act or they want to go on their own, which is a shame because
Yeah.
Martin and Lewis, they probably would have made a lot more movies if they hadn't the split
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
they did
Yeah.
when they were on top of the world.
Well, yeah. I mean, they
And
fit
I'm
their
not picking on those
personalities,
two.
their
Yeah.
characters.
But you know, it's just after so many years and years, it's time to do something else, I guess. You know.
Yeah,
something
yeah.
else. But speaking of the.
Well, Dean wanted to be the only guy that gets the girl, and
Well, he
wanted
got
to
the
be
girl anyway
debonair.
in the movies.
And he's always singing.
Well, he was a fine singer, and he probably wanted to do other things, and I understand that. But they had a great team, Martin and Lewis. I mean, they dominated the theater for years and years and years and years, comedy and everything. And it all started with the Three Stooges. I did a story on the Three Stooges recently.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the history of the Three Stooges?
Not really.
Okay, you know, when we see the Three Stooges, we always think of Moe, Larry, and Curly, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in the 1920s, there was a vaudevillian actor named Ted Healy.
Mm-hmm.
This was before television came out
Mhm.
and radio and so on. And they did live theater versions. It was Ted Healy and his Stooges. That was the original.
Mhm.
And I've got some early, like 1930 black and white clips of Ted Healy. And it was funny because a very young Moe Howard was being slapped around by Ted Healy. And it was funny because, you know, Moe was always slapping his friends.
Yeah.
So to see Moe get slapped by somebody, that's like really funny. But Ted Healy decided to go on his own. And when he did, they wanted to keep the act going. So Moe Howard became the leader.
Yeah.
And then they got Curly in there and the rest was history because there was no Curly originally.
Yeah.
It was Ted Healy, Moe Howard, Shemp Howard, the guy that plays Shemp, and Larry. They were the original Stooges. That's
And then-
called Ted
then when they
Healy.
came up with the-
Brothers.
Yeah, and then as time went by, we had other groups like the Marx Brothers,
Then
and
when they
Merle
had
and
the
Hardy,
cartoon.
Abbott and Costello. But by the time Martin and Lewis came out, they just really
Good.
set well with the audiences at that
Yeah.
time.
Did you ever see the cartoon Jabberjaw?
I've heard of it.
They used the sound effects from Curly in that. No respect, no respect. And he was a shark that was out of water running around all the way.
You know, I never cared for the Three Stooges. I thought it was always just kind of cruel. They're slapping each other around, hurting each other, bashing each other with hammers. I just
Well,
don't
no,
like
that's
it.
called slapstick.
I don't mind slapstick because Gilligan's Island had a lot
Well,
of slapstick, but
that's
it
what it is,
wasn't
though.
the same. I thought it was more mean-spirited. Like, I'm gonna twist your nose. That's not funny to me somehow. Like, oh, like,
Well, you know, it depends. I think the reason the Three Stooges works, even in our time,
Mhm.
is because when you see these people being slapped, it feeds into that carnal side of humans that,
Uh-huh.
just like when you look
Dragging
at
up the wall.
boxers
Yeah,
and they're
yeah.
punching one another and all of a sudden you're getting into it. I think the Three Stooges gets that side of people.
Uh-huh.
Because like, I find it amusing like when Moe would get the hedge clippers and grab
Yeah, I just didn't think it
Larry's
was funny.
nose.
Yeah.
They had
Yeah.
a scene like that on High Road to China with
but
there was this older guy and his his servant, right? And he was continuously, every time he'd say something to his servant would say the wrong thing, being really humane and everything. And
Mhm.
he's like, oh, where's your tie at? Because he always would take his tie and go, you come over here like this, or he'd grab his
Yeah.
nose. And so finally his servant decided not to wear a tie. He ran out of ties. He goes, you've taken them all, sir. I don't have another tie for you to choke me with.
But you know, that getting back, that was called slapstick
Yeah.
humor.
I mean,
And
I loved it in
worked at
Gilligan's
the
Island,
time.
but, you know.
I know. And technically, if you want to get technical, I guess the Three Stooges, you could say is pretty violent, you know.
That's exactly. I didn't think it was humorous to
and
be
some
violent. you
people
know.
may not think that's funny, but
I think the point was,
when you look at it in
Mo
the
got tired of dealing
context,
with idiots.
when you look at the context of that show, I don't really call it violence. It's just it's a different type of humor.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
all. Just,
But the thing is,
and
the
it works,
idiots back
you
then
know.
are the same ones now, just different people.
And of course, they weren't really.
Different times.
Yeah, I know that. I just didn't think it was funny. And even as a
I know,
kid.
and I understand that. And some people may not think the Three Stooges is funny, but
Yeah.
it worked in their time.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Just like when Lucille Ball would go, well, Ricky, and he'd start crying, and it was an irritating cry, and it
Yeah,
irritated us
yeah.
all. So we felt bad for Ricky more than her.
now, I don't know about you guys, but if I were married to someone like Lucille Ball, as far as that character she played on I Love Lucy, I think I'd have to go get some therapy.
Yeah, yeah.
She just drove poor Ricky Ricardo nuts.
He goes,
You
look,
know?
I'd given you dinner, I did everything for you, and I went, I want more.
Oh, but I don't think I want to be married to Ricky either.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the character of Ricky Ricardo was from the old school.
He was
where
faithful.
the woman
The character
did all
was,
the
but the
housework
husband
husband
was
and
yes,
all
yes.
that.
The husband was a
And
little
stuff
bit
like that.
different.
But
Like to
that
run
was
around
the
and
comedy,
have
and that was
roommates.
the times.
Yeah, yeah.
But of all those acts like Abbott and Costello and so on, and Lucille Ball and all the rest of the comedians, Phyllis Diller and so on, me personally, I think the funniest person to ever appear on television was Carol Burnett.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Now that's just my personal opinion. I know she's overshadowed by Lucille Ball, but I used to watch the Carol Burnett show and I'd laugh so much my sides would be hurting.
Mm-hmm.
Like when they did Went with the Wind instead of Gone with the Wind, and she came out with that curtain rod dress. I like to just rolled on the floor when I saw
yeah,
that.
yeah,
That was
yeah.
so funny.
That was her invention.
Had
Uh-huh.
a curtain rod dress.
Yeah, curtain
Did
rod
you
dress.
see the Talking Heads? When
No.
David Byrne wore that. You see that?
I don't have a specific comedian, but you know, I love Gilligan's Island and Alf, and of course the Gong Show. You know,
I
love the
episode
Gong
But
Show.
you know what's fun with all those shows is everybody has a preference.
Yeah,
I thought Gilligan's Island was interesting for its time.
Yeah.
I know that show would be considered goofy and silly
I
by
loved it.
today's
I thought it was
standards.
hilarious.
But what always interested me about that show was how that professor could make a radio out of a coconut.
I know.
But couldn't fix those 3 holes on the side of the boat.
Yeah, that's a good
And,
point.
So they could get off
and
the
they were
island.
always
Did they ever
stuck on that
escape?
island.
Yeah.
And another thing that was funny about that show, people could get on the island and get off, but the castaways
Right.
Never
get off.
could. Yeah,
And why
yeah.
couldn't that professor fix 3 holes?
Oh,
Because
yeah,
that would
exactly.
be the end of the show.
Well, I know, I realize that, but that was what was so funny about Gilligan's Island to me. And of
Yeah.
course,
I just seen a recent episode of Carol Burnett
mhm.
where it was Harvey Korman and her, and they were dressed up as regular people, right? And they went, they went and sat down in the audience. They go, "Can you move over?" "Oh, you can't." So she manipulates, and she has all the audience members of that aisle move over, move over once so they can sit down. He's like, "Are you sure we're at the right show?" "Yeah, we're at the right show." And you know, so they're sitting there and they're criticizing certain people in the audience, saying, "Oh, look at him! Oh my God!" And these people are just starting to laugh really hysterically because they've caught on that this is Carol Burnett actually sitting with them in the audience, right, with Harvey Korman.
Yeah.
And then eventually, towards the end of the skit, he goes, I'm not listening to you. I'm going to check the tickets one more time. I don't think we're in the right place, and I think we're late." "Oh, I don't think so." He takes me and goes, "We're not supposed to be here. We're supposed to be at Lyle Wagner's show." So they get up.
Oh, Wagner. Yeah. Well, you know,
And he's
getting
that
back to
Wonder
Carol
Woman.
Burnett, yeah, I just thought she was the funniest because when you look at that skit, and I've got it at home, you'll see it later on today.
Okay.
Went with the Wind. It was just like watching the movie in like 5 or 6 or 7 minutes. It was like watching the entire film.
If you watch real close with Harvey Korman and Tim Conway too,
Mhm.
a lot of times they would crack up and they try really hard, especially when she came down strutting or stuff with
Yeah, and they did 2 tapings of
She
the Carol
didn't
Burnett
fall.
show in its heyday. They had an afternoon audience where they pretty much stuck with the script,
Mm-hmm.
and then in the second show, that's when Tim Conway would cut loose to see if they, and the whole cast to see if they can make Harvey Korman laugh and throw him off, and it always usually worked.
If
And
they
that's
did
why
the
it was so
Calvary
funny.
scenes, that would happen.
That
I've seen
scene.
them.
But getting back to Gone with the Wind, Went with the Wind,
Mhm.
they had a scene in there where Harvey Korman was playing Rhett Butler. They called him Rat Butler.
Uh-huh.
"Scarlett, I went to bed with you. We come from the same cloth, the same dirty cloth," you know, kind of thing. And it was just funny, just that whole scene.
"I cannot let you even kiss me."
But did you see the movie Gone with the Wind?
No, I never did.
Well, basically, okay, I admit, when I first saw Gone with the Wind, I didn't think I was going to like it because,
Yeah.
you know, I'm African American and it was in that slave era.
Yeah.
And I thought it was going to be dealing with slavery and black people being mistreated, but no, it wasn't that at all.
Yeah.
It was a sick, twisted love story between Scarlett O'Hara
And the rich
and
man.
Rhett Butler, but it happened to be in the days of the Civil War.
Excuse me.
And that was why
It's
I
live.
liked
I'm
it,
Steve.
because it had nothing
In
to
the
do
script.
with slavery, it had nothing to do with all that
Yeah.
Yankee
We'll
stuff.
edit it later.
It was just a sick, twisted, unhealthy relationship.
Interesting.
And so it worked.
Well, he's older than her,
Clark
too.
Gable, he tried everything to make
He-
Scarlett
yeah.
like
He
him.
was a lot older than Scarlett too. That's
And
another
then
problem.
when
It didn't
Scarlett
work.
started liking him and realized what she had, it was too late
Do you
because he
remember-
had reached his breaking point.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember she made the dress out of curtains?
Well, in the real movie, it was a regular dress, but
Yeah.
when Carol Burnett did it, she had these literal curtain
Yeah.
rods,
Yeah.
and they formed it into a dress, you know, like with the little V shape with a curtain rod sticking
Yeah.
out, and that's why it was so outrageous. And Dinah Shore was on that again.
Mm-hmm.
She played one of the main characters on it, and it was just such a funny skit. In fact, speaking of Carol Burnett, they had a skit called The Family with Vicki Lawrence
Oh yeah,
playing the mom.
Mama. Yeah.
And that was so funny that they made a television series out of that character
Yeah.
with Vicki Lawrence, and they instead of calling it The Family,
And she
it's
did a
called
good
Mama's
job as an
Family.
old lady.
And the funniest episode, and I've got a copy of this at my home too.
Okay.
You remember Family Feud, the game show?
Oh
with
yeah, I
Richard
never watched
Dawson?
it. I never
Yeah.
watched it.
Well, Richard Dawson was known for always kissing all the contestants.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I mean, a lot of. He just was smooching on each one week
Yeah, make it
after
up
week.
for Hogan's Heroes not being there.
And so they had this episode where Mama's family got accepted on Family Feud. And so when she was on the show, she was scared to kiss Richard Dawson. And then when he kissed her, she's like, I like that. It was just so funny. Just
Come
just
ask me more questions,
And
Richard.
they were winning the game, right? They were smoking the family. And then when they had the last question before going to the big money, Vicki Lawrence, Mama's character, said some really lame answer, and they got buzzed, and the other family wound up winning. And so then when they got back to Raytown or wherever their home is, they were watching themselves on TV. Come on, Mama, we got to see you on Family Feud. She's like, I don't want to watch that, because they had lost and humiliated themselves. And right when that show was about to start, when Richard Dawson comes on, the power went out, and that was the end of that episode. And, that's just like brilliant writing.
Yeah.
It's so funny. And I think the reason people could relate to Mama's Family was because they thought about the most silliest, mundane things. Like somebody's shirt not being pressed right.
Yeah.
Or somebody not getting a good grade in school. Just, it's just brilliant writing. It was so funny. And Vicki Lawrence, of course, she played perfect Mama. Just, if it weren't for her.
Yeah.
Have you ever
So-
seen the bloopers of Carol Burnett? They had a couple.
Yes, I have. I've got some.
My favorite was when she was trying to be Amelia Earhart. She got stuck in the barrel, and they were going, "Okay, we need you to stand up now." She's like, "You're right. I need to stand up, but I can't right now. So I'm just gonna stay here, sit."
Speaking of sitcoms, you may have never heard of it. It's sometimes been on PBS. It's a British comedy.
Oh no.
Have you ever heard of Keeping Up Appearances? It's a British comedy
Yes.
from Great Britain.
I don't know it,
I
but
see.
It's hilarious.
I love Mr. Bean.
Oh,
Mr.
yeah,
Bean,
Mr. Bean.
he was different to me. You know, the funniest skit I ever saw with Mr. Bean, there was this
The
episode
Thanksgiving
where.
one where he gets the turkey on his head.
Well, no, I was gonna say he was up on the top floor of this like hotel, and he had to run down these flight of stairs to get out real quick. And when he was on the top floor, there was this old lady that was walking really slow, and he couldn't get past her. She was like walking like a turtle. Then he goes around her, and when he goes to the next floor, there she is again in front of him. And so then he goes around her again, and when he gets to the next floor below, there's that old lady all of a sudden. And I just thought that was so funny, you know, because she was blocking his way and walking
They
really
had him-
slow, and he couldn't get around.
They had him on Hot Shots, and
So,
there was a scene in there where he's going to take a picture of
With
Winslow
that-
Nielsen and Priscilla Presley. Right? He goes, just hold still, hold still, hold still. And he kept back. It was on Hot Shots.
With Seinfeld.
No, it was Priscilla Presley and Leslie Nielsen. And so he keeps backing up, going, okay, I've almost got it, and he backed himself off the cliff. And he's going, okay, I think I can take the picture now, as he's falling.
I figured out.
Not familiar with Mr. Bean. I've never watched it. I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing with Seinfeld, that you know, that little basic.
Seinfeld.
Well, he does a show called Hot Shots now, where he drives around in these different cars and he picks all
Yeah.
these entertainers up and they have coffee together.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I've never laughed at Seinfeld once.
You know what was interesting about Seinfeld to me?
Correct.
You know, like when
Everybody
you watch.
coming in when they.
Well, no. I'm talking about the premise. When
Oh.
you watch a show, you usually say this show was about such and such that
Yes.
happened. But when you watch Seinfeld, it was so zany. You couldn't sit there and say this show was about such and
Because
such
it was
because it
supposed to
was
be
really
a show
about
about
nothing.
nothing.
Yeah, that's why I didn't
Yeah.
laugh.
And it worked, but
I don't know why it worked.
it just did. The concept of it, you know,
It's all the
it was
friends.
just silly.
Oddball friends trying to get along in their
Just-
own
just
little
really
scenarios.
Silly
Yeah,
stuff.
yuppies, angst, yuppies,
It was
you
just
know.
yeah, and you know, I didn't necessarily laugh at Seinfeld, but I respected the comedy, and I know that
Kramer and George is
Kramer.
what kept
Do
everybody
you, do you
going.
remember that one where Kramer set out his lawn chair in the hallway and he had this flag, his American flag, and he was acting like it was his deck or whatever.
No. The one I remember, I remember a whole bunch of them, but the one I thought was interesting is when Kramer tries to run like a talk show out of his,
I know, when he was a talk show
his
host.
apartment, and it's like,
Yeah, I
oh,
remember that
I'm thinking
one,
about
yeah.
how big was his apartment to do all this in, you know? That's got to be an
And when he had
amazing
the hot
apartment. You
tub.
can stretch it and make it big. You know?
And when they hid the people in the drawers,
Oh yeah, the Chinese people, yeah.
I could go on and on.
Yeah. I guess with me, with comedy, if you don't laugh, you don't laugh. If I don't laugh, the comedy failed for me if I'm not laughing
Well,
myself
you
sick,
know, comedy, that's just hit or miss because
Yeah.
for every, say, 100 people that like a comedy, there will be 100 who don't.
Exactly, that
Because
is
it
true.
just depends on your forte,
I
and,
think you're right,
there's
yeah.
enough comedy on television.
A lot
That
of
it
it
could
now
fulfill
is more
everybody.
not spontaneous, it's more dry humor.
And another
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
about
And computers
Seinfeld,
and
if you
I-
talk about the history of some of these comedians, when they were younger, they did stand-up comedy, they
Yes.
appeared on the Tonight
Yeah,
Show,
Julia
and then they
Dreyfus.
wound up getting a series. Jerry Seinfeld's a good example.
Julia
Ray
Dreyfus is
Romano's
from
another
Saturday
good
Night Live.
example. Everybody Loves Raymond. And
Yeah.
that show, to me, was funny.
Yeah.
Who, Saturday Night Live?
No, Everybody Loves Raymond.
Oh,
Never
yeah,
watched
I used to
it,
watch
huh.
it.
Because Ray Romano's character, he's like this husband with his good-looking wife and 3 kids, and his parents live next door,
It's always
in-laws,
that way.
and so they're always interfering with the Barone family,
Uh-huh.
and that's what made that show work, especially that mother-in-law,
Oh,
Doris Roberts, the
yeah.
actress,
Oh,
that
Oh yeah,
mother-in-law.
she was good. She was
Oh,
really
she
good.
made those people's lives so miserable. Well, wouldn't you love to have a mother-in-law like that for
Yeah,
real?
Wouldn't it have been
No.
interesting to have her character and then the woman who played George Costanza's mom sit down together? Oh my God, that'd be the ultimate.
Now,
Something
They
like
put
that.
Betty Davis in there
wasn't
too.
George's mom married to George's dad in real life?
Yeah, in real life it was Ann Murin and I can't think of the actor's name. They were married in real life.
They're so
They were
funny.
together for
Oh really?
years.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember watching them when I was a little boy when they were on a show called Rowan and Martin's Laughing
Yes,
when they were
Laughing.
young.
Okay.
Oh, I remember that. I used to like that as a kid. I
Yeah,
remember
well,
like
they were married then, and they did a team, a pair on that
It's
show. And then when they
Mr. Stein.
yeah, and then when
Stein.
they did the other TV shows later on in the future, they were always working together. And it's like I talked about earlier, when you have a husband and wife team, like Mark Landau, Barbara Bain. So that was cool looking at Ann Mary and her husband, and they were on King of I think it was King of Queens with Kevin James.
Okay.
And they were,
Yeah.
they just did all this fun stuff. And especially Seinfeld. I think they were both on Seinfeld too.
Huh.
Mhm.
I think
But
if I
each one of those comedians had their
George,
own
why'd you
show
do
after
that?
appearing on The Tonight Show.
You're murdering yourself. What are you
If I
doing?
remember, do you remember Alf? One of the people, I think it was Raquel Akmonik, the person who played Raquel Akmonik on Alf, she was a guest sometimes on Seinfeld, because I have seen a few episodes of Seinfeld just to try and give it a chance, But I recognized her on Seinfeld, I think, a couple of times. I think, yeah.
Well, you can see all the reruns on CW at 9 o'clock.
CWN?
CW, I think it's Fox Channel.
I gotta get that.
Fox Channel?
Yeah,
You mean
check-
Alf? They have Alf on?
I don't know if Alf is on there, but they do have Seinfeld on there.
Oh, yeah, I know they do.
Somebody-
Yeah, I know, yeah.
And
Cherish is the name of the song.
yes, I know the song.
I'd forgotten how that went.
And
But anyway, getting back to
cherish you.
the comedians, yeah, most of them had their own sitcoms after appearing on The Tonight Show. Like Roseanne, she was on The Tonight Show.
I was surprised how many people.
Ellen was on The Tonight Show and she got her show.
A
I
ton
used
of
to
people
live
came
down the
from.
street from Roseanne's parents.
Oh wow.
But you
In
know,
Salt Lake
Ellen DeGeneres is a very funny lady to me.
I'm gonna be on her show.
And you know what I liked about her when
What?
she did her stand-up comedy? Her comedy wasn't making fun of people who got in trouble or
Yeah.
had misfortune. She'd
Right.
make fun of herself.
Well,
And
she
I
had-
think that's why it worked.
She had a good joke about St. Peter. She made it sound like, okay, she gets up to the gate of heaven. She finally made it there, So she's like, okay, I'm I'm here now. What do I do? Oh, I have to call God. Okay, well, I gotta call. Then first person that gets on the phone with her is St. Peter, right? So St. Peter's like going, telling her, you can't get through yet. It's a bad connection. God's really busy right now. You'll have to call back later. Well, I can't because I'm like in purgatory. I can't go back to earth. I can't go forward. I really need to get this connection through. I really have to. And it was just a whole skit about her trying to talk to God.
Well, Ellen.
She's from Saturday Night Live too.
Ellen DeGeneres, her very first appearance on The Tonight Show was, 30 years ago by now, something like that?
Yes.
And it was based on a conversation she had with God
Oh, interesting.
about fleas.
Interesting.
I thought that was so funny.
So funny.
She was like, had the phone up to her head, and she had Johnny Carson just rolling over behind his desk. Hello, God? This is Ellen DeGeneres. Ellen DeGeneres, Ellen. Because God didn't know who Ellen was, And then when the Lord remembers, oh, Ellen, okay, I remember. What can I do for you? She's like, well, God, I want to know, what are the purpose of fleas?
Yeah.
So the Lord says, well, the flea industry, the collar industry is good. Oh, I didn't think of that. Just this really funny stuff that was so fun.
She's a model now.
Well, no, she was very, very young. Oh, gosh, she was really
What
young.
she does now is she gets people on her show, and they'll have to call somebody up, and it's a whole setup deal, and they have an earpiece in their ear, so they'll be doing crazy stuff in a department store or in a bank, and the guy's purpose or the woman's purpose is to drive the sales clerk or the banker nuts, just absolutely drive them, and then say, okay, I need my blankie because I have to suck my thumb. And it's time for my nap. Can you have me sit down somewhere where I can take my nap? And these people they're like, oh, wow. It's a good prank. It's a good prank.
Mind if we switch gears completely? I kind of wanted to talk more about Star Wars and some points I
Sure,
wanted
we
to
can talk about Star Wars. We got some time still.
Yeah, one thing I forgot to mention about, George Lucas always getting rejected. One reason, if I remember the interviews, from Starlog magazine, a lot of the producers thought, this is too weird. Star Wars, lasers, aliens, spaceships. No one on the theaters is going to want to watch this. This is too weird.
But see, like we're talking about,
Exactly.
these directors that should have the foresight to know something is good, they always say something's not going to work. They always say something, like I talked about in the other show,
how much
looked
it's
at
gonna
with my
cost.
autobiography.
Yeah, or the cost.
All the other publishers were knocking that book and tearing it, and I some of them were sending me emails saying how bad that book was.
Oh, that's awful.
And I was like, hey, that's your opinion. I didn't take it personal because I knew the book was good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like we talked about in the other show, these directors and whatever they call R&R people or whatever they call, they should have common sense to know when something is good, and they don't. They just block everybody
A
off.
lot of them are stereotypes.
Yes, they are.
They do. They always blocking folks off,
The
especially in
media,
the record industry.
the media sets up criteria where if you're going to be in the media industry, this is how we want you to do it. So we have our dictator communist right there saying, this is how you
Yeah,
do
but see, the
this,
problem
and they're
with
not
that is, and
open-minded.
somebody comes along with something original and fresh, like Ellen did, and it works.
Yeah.
See, I
You got to
have-
see that. It's Ellen on the Tonight Show, her first appearance.
Like-
That whole conversation with the Lord, it is just the most humorous, funny.
Like the newest sitcom that came out, Jane the Virgin, I don't really care for that because first of all, if you're a virgin, it's very hard for you to get pregnant. So that was a turn off right there.
Well, I never watched that. I don't think I'm
It's
going.
very dry humor. It's not that funny. I'm thinking this is number one. America's in trouble.
But also, what I also want to say about Star Wars, do you remember after, because I'm a huge science fiction fan too. It was a time before Star Wars and then after Star Wars. Before Star Wars, there was science fiction, but not near everyone. After the success of Star Wars, all the TV producers and movie producers wanted to make science fiction about lasers, space wars, spaceships. So you had Battlestar Galactica, which I loved, Buck Rogers.
I remember those shows. Lauren Green was
fantastic. The Battlestar Galactica.
Speaking of Battlestar
Speedy the
Galactica,
Robot.
I was at Universal Studios tour at the time that show was popular, and they had the Cylons on the show where their red dot would go across their face like on the TV show. And I was doing a 3-day performance with the Jeffrey Foundation in Los Angeles at that time, and they had kids that had physical challenges and mental challenges and stuff. And so we took these kids to that that show, and when they saw those Cylons
Yeah.
with that eye, they got freaked out. They
Oh, yeah.
cried because they thought it was real. And I felt so bad for these kids.
Yeah.
Universal Studios
But,
made actually a theme ride.
Well, this was
Yeah.
a long time ago. This is when Battlestar.
Yeah, and I
Galactica
loved
was
Battlestar
was
Galactica
popular.
as a
That was
kid.
Lauren
Like the
Green.
Cylons
Loved
were the
it.
bad guys. They had this little
Yeah,
red
they were
dot
robots,
that went
yes,
across
yeah.
the robots.
Lauren
And so when
played it all
those
the time,
kids
just
saw
loved it,
that,
yeah.
they were crying and scared, and it took a while to calm those kids down and let them know that that was not real.
Yeah.
Well, they probably were
I-
confused too, because Lauren Green used to be Pa Cartwright, and here he is the commander.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know, and you know, it worked for him.
Yeah, and of course they also had, great movies like Star Crash, Message from Space, Battle Beyond the Stars, and TV shows like Jason of Star Command. So everyone wanted to be on the sci-fi bandwagon for a while.
Yeah.
And it was some of the happiest years of my life, because all the times when I was in school, I'd come home and do my work, but I would watch all these science fiction programs and Star Wars over and over again, and I was living in science fiction heaven. I had all my Star Wars and Star Trek toys and science fiction toys, and make my own, science fiction shows, and I'd play science fiction all day, and I'd read Starlog magazine, and I'd watch the science fiction cartoons, and I'd watch the movies all the time, and I was thinking about it all the time. It was fascinating. I was a science fiction fanatic, and everyone at school was weirded out because I was obsessed with sci-fi.
I see, yeah, your face is red now just talking about it.
All this euphoria, I was like euphoric recall about science fiction.
Well, I'm glad there's a market for you out there.
Now,
So
like,
I
now
loved
there's a
it,
new thing
yeah.
called Sci-Fi Channel. Now you can go back into your TV.
Yeah,
But you
well-
know, the best science fiction, of course, that I think most people would agree would be Star Trek with William Shatner.
Oh yeah, that was fantastic.
I like it when Loxana Troy comes
I
on
think
there
that's
and tries
the
to
ultimate.
tries to
Yeah,
get,
that just was
Captain
wonderful.
Picard.
Now, you know, I like
I love that watching because her and her
This is how you
daughter
figure it out.
would be having psychic talks to each other down the hallway, and the mother's saying to the psychic counselor, "Your captain is hot." He goes, "Mother."
Oh yeah.
And
But
then
see,
John
I
Luke's
didn't
going,
care.
"What are you guys thinking about?"
I didn't necessarily care about the psychic part of science fiction, but,
Yeah.
you know, what was interesting, you remember the original Lost in Space?
Yes.
Gene Lockhart?
Yes.
Well, when we were talking about Dr. Smith earlier, you know,
Yes.
he wasn't a coward originally,
Yes.
because he was a saboteur.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were the writer of Lost in Space, I would have kept that show serious.
Yes, that would have been a lot better.
It would have been more interesting, but as time went by, what they did was they geared it toward children. So
Yeah.
and I saw the documentary on that too.
Yeah.
And that's why they had those weird monsters and those
Yeah.
silly, cheesy plot lines. And
I
then
know.
the actor that played Dr. Smith, he didn't think that audiences would want to see a straight villain for the
Mhm.
entire series. So that character of Dr. Smith evolved to the coward that it became.
Yeah.
Lazy,
The
this
ones
and
that got me going were Night Gallery, Twilight
Night.
Zone.
Yeah, I love those.
Amazing Stories was later, and then
Amazing Stories. Okay.
then they had one with James Coburn that was short called The Dark Room, and it was really cool because every episode he began at the same where you'd hear somebody climbing up steps, and then you'd hear a squeaky door open, and then they pull the drawstring on there, and you're in a closet with him going, "Now, how would you like to learn about this person or this story?" And then you would go right into it. And so you got spooked before you got started.
Definitely, that's good. Anyway, have you noticed since you and I both love science fiction? Have you noticed since the '80s, since the '90s, science fiction has really dropped off? I know there's a
Yeah,
sci-fi
it has.
channel, but
So
I
you
call it
gotta
the
remember
horror
that.
movie
See,
channel.
the thing what we talked about earlier with television is when they get an idea, then everybody jumps on it and
Yes.
wears thin. The soap operas, the sitcoms, the science fiction, and then the list just goes on and on. You know, they
Now it's more of computers.
Even
and
the
stuff
westerns,
and
you know.
supernatural.
Yes, even the
you
westerns.
know how
yeah.
many westerns were on television when I was a kid? They had the
Yeah.
Virginian, they
Yeah.
had the Rifleman,
Mhm.
they had Bat Masterson, they had
There's a new series out that
gosh,
comes
they had a
on
bunch
Sundays
of 'em.
on CW.
Mhm.
It's pretty
Laramie too
It's
with
back
Phil
then.
Carey.
Uh-huh.
I can't remember the name of it, but it's a new one that just came out on CW. It basically is about like Dodge City, almost like Gunsmoke,
Yeah.
but they're all modernized. Everything's modernized in it, and it's talking about different gun fighters that came into town.
Yeah.
What about Bonanza?
Oh yeah.
You know, my birth mom was a big fan of Gunsmoke.
Mm.
My
I
dad's
didn't
into
particularly
Bonanza,
care for that
Nor did
show.
I. My dad was
Yes.
a big fan of Gunsmoke. Yeah.
I mean, they did a fine job acting, and I understand that, but that just wasn't for me. I was more into Rifleman. I was more
Yeah.
into.
I was into Little Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I hate to say this, I'm disappointed by the Sci-Fi Network now, the Sci-Fi Channel 27, because it used to be strictly science fiction. Now I call it the cheap and gruesome horror network, because they have, all those slasher films. They've got nothing but paranormal stuff, and I don't like that stuff. I don't get into that, so I don't watch
that either. So.
I don't watch that show. I mean, the station hardly anymore. Occasionally, if they have a Twilight Zone marathon or a good heroic fantasy or something, I will, or a Star Trek thing. But
Yeah, I know.
I'm disappointed by the Sci-Fi Network. When it started, it was great and had old science
Yeah,
fiction.
it kind of just lost its thing. They
They
just
have little
started throwing
commercials
anything
on the
on.
site.
Yeah, and
stuff.
that's what I don't like about it. It's like I said, science fiction as far as TV and movies have kind of died, sadly. So I watch old reruns of Star Trek, or old reruns of this, or old reruns of that, or maybe read a book, or have my own science fiction fantasies. But I'm not really doing much with my science fiction anymore, because when I was a kid, I always used to ask everyone, how's your science fiction? What are you doing new in the world of science fiction? This is what I'm doing with my science fiction. I'm watching my TV shows, I'm reading my books. I find it very interesting what we're doing with my science fiction. Well, now my only report is there's really not much to do with my science fiction anymore, because there's not much on.
They do
That's
have once in a
television
while on the
for you.
Sci-Fi
And
Channel.
movies and...
They'd have a commercial where it introduces the channel before it comes back on with the next episode of whatever you're watching, even if it's a movie. And there was one particular little insert that I liked. It was a guy, he was full of tattoos, and he didn't have his shirt on. And he had tattoos on the arms, back of him, in front of him, on his chest. And as soon as he sat down, each one of them, one at a time, peeled off of him and went sat beside him for dinner. I thought that was the cutest one.
Oh well, it's almost an hour has almost gone
Fascinating.
by.
No way.
It's almost time to sign off.
Wow.
I mean, that's the fun thing about doing this show. We get to talking and talking.
Learning some
and,
fascinating things, and I didn't know you liked science fiction so much. That's
Oh,
great.
I like science fiction.
Oh,
I
it's
don't like
fascinating.
all science
I don't like
fiction,
all of
but
it,
you
but I
like
think
it.
it's fascinating. Don't you ever just go?
Well, let me talk
"Ugh,
about one last final
All
thing
right.
about pilots. Because
All right.
I have like 300 movies in
Yes.
my collection at home. They're in drawers,
Oh,
which you'll
cool.
see later on. And I have the original Star Trek pilot. I have the footage
Oh,
that's
wonderful.
I have the footage that they did not use in the
Yes,
Star
wonderful.
Trek series.
Yes.
An actor named Jeffrey Hunter
Uh-huh.
was the original captain.
Yes.
And so when they did the menagerie years
Mhm.
later, they took footage from that
Yeah, they did,
pilot,
yes.
and that's why it was believable when
Yes,
they went
yes.
back in time when they were
Uh-huh.
younger, because they really were younger.
Yes.
So that's just kind of a cool pilot.
Fascinating.
And NBC liked the show, they just didn't like the pilot.
Yeah.
So they asked Gene Roddenberry to do
Yeah,
a second pilot, and that's when they got William Shatner and
Yes.
Scotty and the rest of the gang.
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
Yeah.
So I just a little
William
trivia.
Shatner
Fascinating.
was in a Western actually where he got paid twice because he got to play a twin brother to himself.
Yeah, and on that note, we're going to have to stop.
Yes.
But yeah, William Shatner was a brilliant
He
actor,
was.
in my-
Excellent.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being part of Asaph Cafe. Final acknowledgements, we have our aging rocker Emmett here. We hope you enjoyed the conversations on both shows. Our veteran guest and hostess is back. Our
Oh,
mascot
Pee
Pee
Wee,
Wee is sleeping,
2015.
and we have Teresa on my right.
The hippie.
So until our next
Yippee, yippee,
show,
woohoo!
ladies and gentlemen, I am Asaph Adonai Maranatha.
Be what you want. It's Halloween month. She's been worked up.
Oh.